New York, in Paris, and other places. Tell us about those. And also 9/11.
Yes, I covered 9/11. I was home that morning voting in the primary in New York City, the mayoral primary, and I heard my mother called me and said there's a plane in the World Trade Center. So basically went to the closest train, couldn't get on the train, actually took a bus to the bridge, the 59th Street Bridge, which goes into Manhattan, but I couldn't get that close to the bridge, so I actually hitchhiked from a man who was driving a truck. I never hitchhiked in my life until that day, 9/11/2001. And then I walked over the 59th Street Bridge, the Queensboro Bridge, into Manhattan while thousands of people were running away from Manhattan. I was going to Manhattan, and so was a doctor. So it was, of course, a day that none of us will ever
Right.
forget, and we worked nonstop hours. And Noreen Lark, the producer who is here with me on St. Vincent, she was working with me that day, and we shared a room that night, and we're sharing a room here.
Wow. So that's a lot of memories there for you. And to have her with you in St. Vincent now, covering a case that you first reported back then. Tell us how that unfolded back in 2006 when you first reported about Veron Primus, the murder of this young girl in New York in 2006.
Yes, we didn't know his name back then. Chanel Petro Nixon was the 16-year-old girl who disappeared on Father's Day 2006, an honors student who went to Boys and Girls High School in Brooklyn, just very well loved by her family, good hardworking parents, and she went out to put in a job application at one of the restaurants on Fulton Street in Brooklyn, at Applebee's. It's a chain in New York and elsewhere, and she never came home. And when her parents first went to the police were wondering, did she run away? What happened? And 4 days later, her body was found in a garbage bag on the sidewalk. The sanitation men had gone to pick up the garbage bag. They said it was heavy, and the woman who lived in the house, they said to her, you have to break up the garbage. And when the bag was opened, they found Chanel, and she was folded over in a fetal position, and it was traumatic, obviously, to the people who found her. And the police just felt awful about what had happened because they knew she was a real good girl. She worked hard, her family worked hard, she didn't deserve this. And a minister in the community, Reverend Taharka Robinson, started marches for justice because it really shook that community what happened to Chanel. And when we followed up on the story, because there was no suspect ever announced, 2 years ago, I did a segment for Mary Murphy Mystery. I started out being called Mary Murphy's Mysteries, and now it's just singular, Mary Murphy Mystery. I did the segment, I interviewed her mom, Miss Petro Nixon, and she said to me at that time, I know the young man she was supposed to meet that day. He used to come to my house. I know him, and I feel he knows what happened to my daughter. And at that time, we started using the name Veron Primus. Initially, I was pronouncing it the American way, Primus, but it's
Right,
Primus.
Primus.
I know that's the way it's pronounced here. And she used his name, and we were very careful about how we did the story then 2 years ago, which was sort of an update on this mystery. He was in state prison then because apparently there was some kind of pattern of behavior going on. After Chanel Petro Nixon was found, 2 other women at some stage accused him of sexual assault. And he did not go to a jury trial, he went to a bench trial, and he was found not guilty. But then there was another woman, an ex-girlfriend, who said that he was harassing her and trying to hold her captive, and she got an order of protection, and apparently he violated that order of protection. So a judge in Brooklyn held him in criminal contempt, and he was sent to state prison. And the way it works in the United States, in New York, if you're convicted, usually of a felony that would send you to state prison, when your time is served, you can be deported to the nation where you were born. And he was deported last May, I believe, May 2015.
Okay. What made you want to follow up on this story?
The reason I wanted to follow up, I was on vacation in Florida almost 2 weeks ago, just wrapping up the vacation, and I received a message on Facebook, and it was just one line in my private inbox. It said, did you hear about what happened at St. Vincent? And I was thinking the person was talking about the hospital in New York City, which is now closed. So it was a little confusing to me, so I wrote back, please tell me more. And the woman wrote back maybe a day later, and she said something about Chanel. That stuck in my head. And she said, well, maybe her parents had moved on and they may be not wanting to hear this. And then I Googled Veron Primus, and I saw he had been arrested here, and I heard the reason he was questioned initially was because of this woman who was held in captivity in the Vermont section of St. Vincent, your island. And when she was found after 3.5 months, because a woman saw a note in the refrigerator and saved her essentially, I said, this is a pattern. If indeed he held this woman captive for 3.5
Right.
months, stuff like this happened in New York, and I thought it was an unbelievable story. I thought there were miracles involved. A miracle that the woman in the kitchen who was looking for the insulin shot to help her neighbor and give her the shot, that she found the note in the medicine box and got the right people to come and save Moana.
You interviewed Moana Hathaway.
Yes.
Tell us what that experience was like. Tell us at least what you can share with us.
Moana is an incredibly strong woman, but she's very shaken by what happened. Obviously, it's
Yes.
been an enormous trauma for her. And what really moved me a lot was seeing the way she reacted when I asked about her mother, because Moana's mother is terminally ill with cancer, and Moana used to help to care for her, and Moana has a little boy, he's only 4 years old. And when I asked her about her mother and not being able to help with her mother while she was being kept in captivity, she just sobbed. You know, her mother obviously means an enormous amount to her. Every time I mentioned her mother, it was very, very emotional for her. And she got emotional about the young woman who saved her, who would like her name kept out of this.
Yes.
She said, I want to be the unknown person who did the good deed and would do the good deed again. But I interviewed her, and she's a remarkable woman.
She would be, because, you know, under strange other circumstances, somebody who found the note might actually go to the owner of the house and say, hey, I found the note. But under this circumstance, she took it serious enough to go to the police and report that matter to the police. So we're very grateful to her that she would have done that and basically led to the discovery of Moana, and also to the charges, the murder charge, and led later on to Charlene Graves. But before we go back on to that, you said you interviewed her.
Yeah.
Most of us don't know her. We don't know her name. So tell us a little bit about that interview.
The woman is in her early 20s. She's a college student. She's a very bright woman. She's a church-going woman. She's a loving lady. She was a little bit nervous about doing the interview initially, but we communicated back and forth, and we're both very similar people, but we share the same interests. I told her I'm a woman of faith, and I think she connected with that. We like tennis, so she's a lovely, lovely lady. I'm privileged to have met her and to have interviewed her. I'm very grateful to her. I'm grateful to Moana. And I also met Charlene's mother.
Right.
I interviewed her yesterday.
I was about to ask you about that interview. We know that since last year, November, she would have lost her daughter. And a lot of persons, you know, after Charlene Graves' murder, because a lot of persons would have interacted with Charlene, we knew her, we would have met her all over the place, quite a pleasant young lady. So when that gruesome murder happened, and then, you know, there wasn't any discovery of who would have done that to her, you know, it kind of leaves you without closure. So when this happened, that Viren Primus was charged with Charlene Graves' murder, you know, we know that would have brought some element of closure to the mother. You had the chance to interview the mother. What was that like?
She's a very lovely woman too. She was there with her grandson, who's only almost 2 years old. We need to connect a couple of dots, because by Moana being found and by the caretaker in the house going to the police, Charlene's murder was allegedly solved.
Right.
Because Viren Primus is being charged with her murder. And I know from my sources in New York City, in law enforcement, that a very major piece of evidence was found at the house. They found the murder weapon that Charlene was killed with.
Right. And this led, of course, to the charges being laid against Viren Primus for the murder of Charlene Graves. Have you been in contact with the mother of the young lady who was murdered back in 2006?
Yes, I
With
have.
regards to the developments, no. And how is this gonna play out for her?
Last Thursday night, when I received the information that Primus was being questioned about the abduction, about the holding the woman in captivity, I called up Ms. Petra Nixon, and she was shaken. She said there's a lot of confusion right now, because she had only heard from the minister that something was going on here on the island of St. Vincent. She didn't want to say too much before all the pieces fell together. She did speak to me on the phone though, and I'm grateful to her for that. The next morning, I went to Brooklyn after I found out that he had been charged with murdering a woman here on the island of St. Vincent. When I went to Brooklyn, the pastor, not the pastor, the minister that has been the advocate for justice for Chanel in Brooklyn, he was coming from their apartment, the family apartment, and he said they can't even speak right now. He said they were just devastated because everything was hitting them at once. And they just really want to know who killed their daughter, Chanel. And they've been walking around for 10 years with no closure. They want the truth.
Do you have any idea what happened between the police who came from New York to St. Vincent and of course they went back? Do you have any information as to what they would have gathered?
I know.
Or can you say? Is there anything you can say?
What I can tell you is that detectives from the Cold Case Squad have taken over this case in New York, and they flew here to St. Vincent, and they did speak to Primus for a short time, and then he asked for a lawyer. But they consider the trip here very fruitful. They feel that it was a good trip from a law enforcement standpoint.
Okay, and I'm very sure that Mrs. Nixon would breathe some sigh of relief, maybe knowing that is going to transpire. So I'm very, very sure that she would breathe a sigh of relief in that process.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention something before we go on. The reason that we're down here with a crew, Crime Watch Daily, which is a nationally syndicated program in the United States, saw the story that I did last Friday for Pix11. It was the lead of the 6 o'clock news. And the producer from Crime Watch Daily said, we have to do that story. I want to send a crew to St. Vincent. So we spent all of last weekend trying to make that happen. And Noreen Lark, our producer, and myself, we were in Kennedy Airport. We still didn't have our ticket Monday night. And we knew we had to get out Monday night. We just had to get here. And the first time we were online, we didn't get on because they were still doing the arrangements. But within 2 minutes, we had our tickets and we were on the 9 o'clock flight. So I thank Crime Watch Daily for seeing what an important story this is and for sending us to St. Vincent.
Yes, we have to thank them very much because I know Crime Watch Daily, they follow a lot of stories, and it's very important that we give them a little shout out. We tell them thanks very much because without them you would not be here and you would not be covering this story with your team. So we're very, very grateful to Crime Watch Daily.
I have to thank your radio station. I have to thank Extreme FM 104.3, in particular Kristen Dean, who works with social media, and she broke the story, or was among the team here that broke the story about Primus being arrested for the murder of Charlene Graves. And I contacted Kristen. By good grace, I got in touch with Kristen last Friday when I was starting this story for New York, and we started sharing information, and she gave me permission to use the photo that the radio station had on its website showing Primus and also showing a photo of Charlene Graves. And we started a dialogue, and she's been so enormously helpful, and the team from your radio station. I thank Mr. Cato, the general manager, for having us here today along with you. It's been a wonderful experience.
Well, I'm glad that we've been able to accommodate you 100%, and I'm also want to say, yeah, you're welcome on behalf of the entire Extreme team. We're happy that we've been able to collaborate with you up to this point, and we hope actually that some justice can be solved, and it can come to some sort of justice for not just Charlene Graves, not just Minowa, but also for Mrs. Dixon and her family. We're hoping that some sort of conclusion can come from that. The question that I want to ask you again is, from here, what can we expect with this story from your end? Because we know that you're leaving shortly. You're going back to New York. What follow-up can we expect from this story?
Well, I'm still gathering the elements for the story, so I don't want to say too much about what we do next, but we're going to be here for more than a few days, and making it a complete, comprehensive story. Where we'll be in the neighborhood where Moana was saved. I mean, that's a really sensational, compelling part of the story. So we'll be there. Yesterday when we met Charlene's mother, we were way up on the top hill, Dorsetshire Hill,
Dorsetshire Hill,
and that was really something to meet her mom. She was a lovely lady, and to see the sight of most of the island from up there was beautiful, but sad.
View.
It's amazing.
Yes. So persons can expect that you will be going to the Vermont area pretty soon to do some coverage there. Have you had a chance to speak to Viron Primus or to interview Viron Primus, or will you have that chance?
I will try. I will try very hard. I would be fair in the interview, so if Mr. Primus or his lawyer would like to get in touch with me, it's pretty easy to do on my Mary Murphy Mystery Facebook page. I have an inbox, a private inbox, and I would love to interview Mr. Primus and his attorney.
So they both can know that you're interested in interviewing Mr. Primus. So his lawyer his lawyer would have to get in touch with you on his behalf.
Yes, you know, we were briefly near the area of the prison yesterday where he's being held. And we would also like to talk to the police commissioner because St. Vincent helped crack a big case here, but also may help crack a huge case in New York City. So